I occupy a part of the plain of Ceres at the foot of the Mount Belliès. Today, I have become a bird sanctuary, one of the largest ornithological sites in Europe. But what adventures it took to get me there. I was born of a huge lake which 20,000 years ago stretched out 80 kilometers to the Aegean Sea. Over time, this lake turned into a swamp. Only two bodies of water remained. To the south, the great Lake Achinos, and to the north, me, Lake Kerkini. It was in 1922 that all my troubles began. In that year, tens of thousands of refugees from Turkey settled on this marshy plain, oblivious to the danger. In under a year, there would be 10,000 victims decimated by malaria or drowned by the flooding of the Strymonas River, which flows through me. Faced with such carnage, Greek authorities decided to drain the plain of Ceres, and in the process, to erect a dam to regulate flooding and make the plain habitable and arable. The procedure triggered a drastic drop in my water level. In 1932, the dam was completed, the Strymonas River brought under control, and the Ceres plain drained right out to the coast. In the space of a few months, a wetland the size of the Camargue had been wiped off the map. My surface, which had shone like a mirror, had given way to a desert from which all fauna and flora had vanished. Luckily, things didn't stay that way. So how then, starting from nothing, did life fight back? From 1934 onwards, upstream from the dam, the Strymonas shifted its bed, depositing sediment here and there and creating small ponds and islands. The river's floods reshaped the landscape, and some new species started to thrive. And I came back to life. I became once more a lake worthy of the name. With the arrival of spring, my first hosts are always toads. I provide shelter for their amorous exploits. Here, a female laden with thousands of eggs is intercepted by a male who clings onto her for a short romantic journey. My aquatic gardens have already been decorated with these garlands of black pearls. They're the eggs laid by other female toads and immediately fertilized. Gradually, my islands become populated by plovers, tiny waders that only feed in sand and mud. Still shaky on their feet, the chicks are starting to look for their own food, but their parents still keep an eye on them. In case of danger, a warning cry orders the chicks to run to safety. No dragging your feet. At 4 weeks old, the young plovers are already getting restless. They're ready for life's adventures. My surface is gradually getting filled in with aquatic plants and rafts of dead leaves. Their decomposition enriches the mud, which in turn attracts waterbirds never seen here before. Among the new arrivals are the crested lapwing and the common sandpiper. At the foot of the dam, I'm sheltering a large tribe of green frogs, big insect eaters. The dragonflies are the easiest to hunt. After weeks spent in water as voracious larvae, they finally emerge as these creatures of grace. This profusion of new life is also going to bring me some new visitors. These birds flew back from Africa last night, a soft chirping announcing their arrival. The delicately rolling repeated notes identify them as European bee-eaters. They go to sleep early and wake up late. In the morning, there's no way they'll set off on a hunt until all the insects have started to fly about. Until then, they bask in the sun to get warm, have a stretch, groom themselves, and warm up their voices. Here they are ready to go and search for their first meal. In a few minutes, their breakfast has been gulped down. Once they're full, they're off to inspect last year's colony site. It's a series of cavities in sandy slopes and small cliffs that were formed by the flooding of the Strimonis River. What state are the old galleries in? Will we have to dig new ones? Drilling a tunnel 1 to 2 meters deep that leads to an egg-laying chamber represents an enormous amount of work for these bee-eaters. They'll have to remove at least 7 kilos of rubble. The couple work together, taking turns to dig. The male doesn't forget to court his mate, and from time to time he offers her a small delicacy. The gallery's so narrow they can't turn around, so until the bridal chamber's completed, they have to go out backwards. This makes the European bee-eaters real reverse gear champions. They only eat insects caught in mid-flight. A beetle walking past in easy reach doesn't interest them at all. Not at all. My tiny sand martins also often nest in these small cliffs to breed. As they only weigh 12 to 14 grams, how could they possibly defend themselves against a 45 to 80 gram bee-eater who decides to take over their nest. If the sand martin's burrow gets illegally occupied, they have to dig out a second one, sometimes even a third one, if there are a lot of bee-eaters around. But they're tough birds, and the hard work doesn't scare them. The multitude of galleries weakens the embankment. A passing buffalo or a minor flooding of the Strimonis are sometimes all it takes to trigger a landslide. Here, the breaking point occurred at the feathered breeding chambers from which the chicks had already hatched. They have to start all over again, digging, cosily lining the chamber, egg-laying, brooding and feeding. The swallows are in a state of panic. A fox is lurking at the foot of the colony, attracted by the scent of fresh food coming from all the inaccessible galleries above its head. My vegetation continues to diversify. I have water lilies, rushes and irises, as many plants as there are insects to appreciate them. In this way, new wings come to hover above my still waters. There are whiskered terns, common terns and Mediterranean gulls. Black-necked grebes too, the only grebes that can do without fish. They content themselves with amphibians, insects and aquatic larvae that they hunt underwater. The birds have become so numerous on my beaches that they all nest together in the same colony, all species combined. And some of them forge rather unusual pacts. In spring, on the flooded meadow where they make their nests on plant rafts, the grebes and whiskered terns lend each other a helping hand. It's like a strange alliance between midget submarines and fighter jets. The terns can hover at the water's surface to snatch insects and fry, but they can also soar skyward like rockets. The two species combine their different skills to protect the colony. The grebe's job is surveillance. Their sight is just as piercing in the open air as underwater, making them remarkable lookouts. The tern's job is air defense. As soon as a grebe has spotted an enemy and gives the alert, they all take off at once. The black kite will soon give up. Thanks to this profusion of life, a vast reed bed the size of Paris has developed along my shores. My biodiversity is getting back into shape. Between the reed hedges, bitterns, grey-lag geese, ducks and pond herons peck at plants and harpoon the abundant small prey for their chicks. My growing population is also good news for the birds of prey, who are fond of amphibians and chicks. The harrier sets up its nest among the reeds to be as close as possible to its food supply. The white-tailed eagle, however, nests in nearby forests. The peregrine falcon hovers so high in the sky it's almost invisible. It patrols the sky in search of prey, which is always a bird that it seizes in mid-flight. It then cuts its catch into pieces to feed its hungry chicks waiting on a cliff face of Mount Belliès. This bird of prey, the fastest in the world, is also capable of some really crazy acrobatics. You might think it would be invulnerable to attack by predators, but that's not the case. Nesting up in the cliffs of Mount Belliès is its arch enemy, the eagle owl. This bird plunders falcons' nests, hunts migratory birds on the lake in winter, and can even attack foxes. The eagle owl is so imposing that it's also called the king of the night. At all hours of the day or night, in my forests, along my banks, on my surface, life abounds. The throb of life is everywhere, and my mirror surface becomes a dance floor. In 1980, you could say that nature had won the game. I had become almost as luxuriant as the plain of Ceres had been before it dried up. All Mediterranean freshwater birds would come to nest on the shores of my islands. All of them. But soon enough, humans would once again disenchant me. In 1983, when the birds arrived here to reproduce, they couldn't recognize the landscape. This time, I hadn't shrunk, I had expanded. I had become nothing but water. All my vegetation had disappeared. This forest was the only one that hadn't been totally submerged. The explanation for this turn of events was to be found in the surrounding countryside. Downstream, farmers had done well for over 50 years, and they wanted to increase their crop production even further. For this, they needed more water. That's why in 1983, it was decided to raise the dam at my southern end and to build 26 kilometers of dikes across my two banks from east to west. These constructions created a reservoir for me that contained enough water to irrigate the entire plain of Ceres during the whole summer season, with disastrous consequences for my hitherto abundant ecosystem. My large reed beds, wet meadows, and layers of water lilies were drowned under several meters of water. For 90% of my birds, I became uninhabitable. A year later, in 1984, scientists came to measure the effects of my metamorphosis. Of course, their findings were alarming. My biodiversity had been seriously disrupted. Most of the birds that fed in the mud and nested in the reeds had deserted the haven that I was for them. The others had been decimated by poaching, and the sites where they nested had disappeared due to uncontrolled tree felling. Humans had wreaked havoc. On the other hand, as my area had increased tenfold, my waters had become much richer in fish than they had been, and fishing became a new economic activity. Luckily, my birds are also keen on fish. Although the raising of the dam had scared away the black-necked grebe that enjoyed living amidst the rushes, its relative, the great crested grebe, came to take its place. This grebe is a strict piscivore. It's fish or nothing. The great crested grebes nested in colonies scattered about in the remaining thin strip of reeds on my northern shore. The grebe couples form in winter, but then wait until spring to start courting. For several weeks, my shallow waters will host the painstakingly precise choreography of their nuptial dances. Some invitations become irresistible. Males and females both share the brooding period, which lasts for 3 to 4 weeks. Great crested grebes have their legs set far back, like the propeller of a torpedo. This isn't very good for walking, but is ideal for diving underwater to hunt. The grebe chicks, barely hatched, take refuge on the back of one of their parents, well out of sight of any carnivorous fish. In this way, their life begins with a cozy cruise in a soft feather bed. Before their first meal, they have to swallow a few feathers to line their digestive tract and protect it from sharp bones. Sooner or later, these baby birds will have to leave the comforts of their mobile nest. As they never do this of their own free will, they must be trained to get used to it by having a bath every day. The bigger they get, the more fish they need. When there aren't enough fish near the nest, the parents split up, each taking half the brood. They both then set off to areas with more fish and start teaching their chicks the art of underwater hunting. For other aquatic birds, this training isn't necessary. As soon as they hatch, the young are clever enough to find their own food. The strip of reeds bordering my northern shore is too narrow for each species to have its own territory. There are constant neighbourhood disputes. The moorhen, coot and grebe, all very common European birds, are among the few species that were not forced to leave by the raising of the dam. After all the hustle and bustle of a spring day, a soothing silence envelops my little world. But as the night comes to an end, an extraordinary spectacle is brewing. It starts every day at dawn, and it only happens here. First, the great cormorants enter the scene, circling above the waves. And then they start their collective hunt. The flock changes size, breaks up, and then joins up again. As soon as one flock starts to intervene, it attracts all the others. The cormorants chase the fish towards the shore where the water is more shallow. And this is precisely what the pelicans are waiting for. They arrive by the hundreds and join forces with the cormorants. Together, they form a wall of feathers and beaks. The fish can no longer get out. Near the water's edge, herons and spoonbills are waiting. By watching the trajectory of the army of hunters, they can anticipate the exact point where the fish will get trapped. Often over 1,000 birds take part in these collective hunts, involving a dozen different species. Seven species nest in one of my most precious biotopes, my flooded forest. 20,000 individuals in all, and that's not counting the chicks. This is my forest. It's the beating heart of my ecosystem and an essential ecological niche. Once again, the scientists pleaded my case. And suddenly, in 1996, there was a new twist. The Greek state finally decided to protect me. A management team was created. Bit by bit, the wild tree felling stopped, and the poaching too. For the larger waders, this forest is an ideal refuge. There's beautiful foliage to build their nests with, and my fish-filled waters at their feet. Their population increases every spring. Because my forest stretches over islands, there are no terrestrial predators coming to plunder the nests. Feral cats and martins would have to swim to get them, but they're not keen on getting wet. Danger can only come from the sky. But the large size of these colonies, with hundreds of sentries and defenders, guarantees their collective security. This overcrowding can lead to quarrels, or rather, supposed quarrels. For a couple, uniting against an unpleasant neighbour is a way to strengthen their ties. This is crucial. The male and female must really stick together to successfully raise a brood. From February to July, from the construction of the nest to the fledging of the chicks, the couples will struggle like never before. The brooding period will be their one moment of respite. Now the eggs are beginning to hatch. There will never again be a second of silence in the colony. The chicks are constantly hungry. They're never satisfied. Their parents toil day and night. In the early morning, all the fishing posts next to the forest and further offshore are still occupied. The cormorants pursue their prey deep down into my waters. Their plumage is permeable like a sponge. As their feathers swell with water, they increase in weight, transforming them into swift and agile divers. To compensate for this, the cormorants have to take breaks in the sun every 20 minutes to dry their feathers and warm up. Cormorants hunt just as well in a few centimeters of water as in deeper water, either alone or working as a group. I also host a variety of species of heron. Each species has its own special technique for catching fish. The black-crowned night heron remains perfectly still at its chosen post, completely blending into the landscape, until a fish passes within its reach. Conversely, the pond heron works tirelessly to flush out frogs, larvae, and even young snakes. And when it's in the trees, it relishes a catch of insects and spiders. The Eurasian spoonbill doesn't need to see its prey. It makes its choice merely by touch. Its beak is lined with tactile cells, and it can identify everything it touches very precisely, whether that's fish, tadpoles, or mollusks. All my fauna and flora has been protected since 1996 and has continued to flourish from one springtime to the next. Everything that once damaged my biodiversity is now just a bad memory. There's still just one little problem. My Dalmatian pelicans can't nest here. The dikes created an artificial rise in the water level, which stops them reproducing. At brooding time, their nests are completely flooded. In 2002, the management team, my protectors, decided to come to the aid of this bird, which was categorized as vulnerable. 2 platforms on stilts were set up in the sectors where they had been attempting to nest. And from 2004 onwards, the Dalmatian pelicans gratefully settled there, laid their eggs, and have managed to raise their young. Even today, the nests are occupied every year from February to the end of July. This is the first time in more than a century that a new colony of Dalmatian pelicans has formed in Europe. And it is I who have the honour of welcoming them. They're settling everywhere, all along my banks, amidst my reeds, and even in the ports. As poaching has stopped, they've become less suspicious. They even approach the fishermen and wait for them to sort the fish in their nets. My return to grace was confirmed in 2005, the year I was fully recognised for what I am. I was declared a national park. The European Union immediately gave me a financial boost. Staffing levels and resources increased. The result? My wildlife is flourishing as never before. Take great cormorants, for example. In 1984, there were only a few dozen. There are now more than 13,000. My growth has not only benefited the birds. Look at all the tiny black spots that dot my greenest shores. These are all mammals, and not just any mammal. This majestic horned beast, which looks like some mythological creature, is the water buffalo. My buffaloes have an almost aquatic lifestyle, and they are satisfied with only meagre vegetation. They graze at the marsh's edge, ruminate while half submerged, take mud baths to keep off mosquitoes, and also just bathe in the waters. The water buffalo, which was originally from Asia, was introduced to the Balkan Peninsula 3,000 years ago. Several herds were present in Greece, but this so-called Greek breed almost became extinct towards the end of the 20th century. Here on my shores, there were only about 50 individuals left. The European Union has the goal of safeguarding ancient domestic breeds. It's been subsidizing water buffalo breeding since 2005. So much so that today there are several thousand of them. It's a good season for the buffaloes. It's late August and downstream irrigation has lowered my water level by at least 2 meters. I have become completely unrecognizable. Every year at the end of summer, 10,000 hectares of wet meadows appear where my blue waters lay. This brand new grass is a real treat for the buffaloes. They are present here all year round, and they're one of the few animals that witness my birds flying in and out from spring to winter. For decades, the hunting season meant that it was too dangerous for birds to linger on my shores in the autumn and winter. But now national park status has been granted to me, everything has changed. Autumn and winter have become magical seasons. Yet again, my appearance has completely changed. Acres and acres of mudflats and wet meadows now line my banks. In addition to fish and insects, I now offer a limitless supply of bloodworms, microcrustaceans, mollusks, and a large selection of invertebrates. At the beginning of autumn, the aerial ballet of the migratory birds begins. They flock here from all over Europe, some even from beyond the Arctic Circle. The white pelicans arrive in small groups. After a few weeks, there are several thousand of them. Most are just stopping over before heading off to Africa. They're my birds of passage. Other migrants, on the other hand, will stay here all winter. By the end of the summer, my bird's daily rhythm has totally changed. Gone is the huge energy and non-stop focus spent on rearing the chicks, as they've become completely independent. Now, it's every bird for itself. For the time being, 3 activities take precedence over all the rest. Eating to store up fat, puffing up your plumage for thermal insulation, and sleeping. All the birds need to regain strength, either to resist the great winter cold or to fly off to a warmer destination. If my surface freezes, which is rare, all my birds leave me. Due to global warming, some winters are so mild that the waters of my large mudflats stay relatively warm and biologically active. Unicellular algae, invertebrates, and tiny crustaceans all continue to multiply freely. My waterfowl make the most of all this abundance. The waders' pointed beaks are very sensitive. The snipes, the pied avocets, and the redshanks only need to probe the mud a little to get at all the microorganisms swarming there. The ducks, tufted poachards and teals have their own method. They sieve the silt through the serrated edges of their mandibles. Because of climate change, tens of thousands of birds are still present on my surface from early autumn to midwinter. It's as if they'd passed the word around. No need to fly to the other side of the Mediterranean this year. Let's just stay in Kerkini. My whole surface then becomes the stage for a fascinating aquatic and aerial ballet. When I freeze up, which is increasingly rare, all my birds leave me. All of them. However, there was an exception to this in the early 2000s, during a very harsh winter. A group of Dalmatian pelicans were just too weak to fly away. Some kind fishermen decided to feed them, and the following winter, these pelicans didn't fly away. Calmly floating on my icy waters, they were again waiting for the fishermen to feed them. The fishermen had the idea of showing these waiting pelicans to tourists. For a few euros, they took them to see the birds up close. This event now even attracts ornithologists and professional photographers. And I am the proud setting for the whole spectacle. A beautiful relationship has been forged between humans and these birds, who prefer me to all the other lakes in Europe. But alas, nothing lasts forever. In 2018, a new misfortune struck. At the end of winter, a violent storm devastated my flooded forest. And even worse, overgrazing and artificial flooding are now hindering the regeneration of the forest. So, where will my big waders go to nest? This is a new setback for me. Humans have often wronged me, and sometimes they've offered me protection. So far, I've always recovered from everything. But will my beloved birds be able to adapt once again to this new situation?